1984, often published as 1984, is a dystopian novel by English author George Orwell published in 1949. The novel is set in Airstrip One, a province of the superstate Oceania in a world of perpetual war, omnipresent government surveillance and public manipulation, dictated by a political system euphemistically named English Socialism under the control of a privileged elite of the inner party that persecutes individualism and independent thinking as thoughtcrime. The tyranny is epitomized by Big Brother, the party leader who enjoys an intense cult of personality but who may not even exist. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. It is not interested in the good of others, it is interested solely in power. The protagonist of the novel, Winston Smith, is a member of the Outer Party, who works for the Ministry of Truth, which is responsible for propaganda and historical revisionism. His job is to rewrite past newspaper articles, so that the historical record always supports the party line. The instructions that the workers receive specify the corrections as fixing misquotations and never as what they really are, forgeries and falsifications. A large part of the ministry also actively destroys all documents that have been edited and do not contain the revisions. In this way, no proof exists that the government is lying. Smith is a diligent and skillful worker but secretly hates the party and dreams of rebellion against Big Brother. As literary political fiction and dystopian science fiction, 1984 is a classic novel in content, plot and style. Many of its terms and concepts, such as Big Brother, doublethink, thoughtcrime, Newspeak, Room 101, telescreen, 2 + 2 = 5, and memory hole, have entered into common use since its publication in 1949. 1984 popularized the adjective Orwellian, which describes official deception, secret surveillance and manipulation of recorded history by a totalitarian or authoritarian state. In 2005, the novel was chosen by Time magazine as one of the 100 best English-language novels from 1923 to 2005. It was awarded a place on both lists of Modern Library 100 Best Novels, reaching number 13 on the editor's list, and 6 on the reader's list. In 2003, the novel was listed at number 8 on the BBC's survey The Big Read. History and title. George Orwell encapsulate the thesis at the heart of his unforgiving novel. In 1944, the implications of dividing the world up into zones of influence that had been conjured by the Tehran Conference, and 3 years later he wrote most of it on the Scottish island of Jura. From 1947 to 1948, despite being seriously ill with tuberculosis, on the 4th of December 1948, he sent the final manuscript to the publisher Secker and Warburg, and 1984 was published on the 8th of June 1949. By 1989, it had been translated into 65 languages, more than any other novel in English at the time. The title of the novel, its themes, the Newspeak language and the author's surname are often invoked against control and intrusion by the state. While the adjective Orwellian describes a totalitarian dystopia, characterized by government control and subjugation of the people, Orwell's invented language, Newspeak, satirizes hypocrisy and evasion by the state. The Ministry of Love oversees torture and brainwashing, the Ministry of Plenty oversees shortage and rationing, the Ministry of Peace oversees war and atrocity, and the Ministry of Truth oversees propaganda and historical revisionism. The Last Man in Europe was an early title for the novel, but in a letter dated the 22nd of October 1948 to his publisher Frederick Warburg, 8 months before publication, Orwell wrote about hesitating between The Last Man in Europe and 1984. Warburg suggested changing the main title to a more commercial one. In the novel 1985, Anthony Burgess suggests that Orwell, disillusioned by the onset of the Cold War, intended to call the book 1948. The introduction to the Penguin Books Modern Classics edition of 1984 reports that Orwell originally set the novel in 1980, but he later shifted the date to 1982, then to 1984. The final title may also be a permutation of 1948, the year of composition. Throughout its publication history, 1984 has been either banned or legally challenged, as subversive or ideologically corrupting. Like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, Kalakane by Karen Boyer and Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Literary scholars consider the Russian dystopian novel We by Zamyatin to have strongly influenced 1984. Copyright status: the novel is in the public domain in Canada, South Africa, Argentina, Australia, and Oman. It will be in the public domain in Brazil in 2021, and in the United States in 2044. Background: 1984 is set in Oceania, one of three intercontinental superstates that divided the world after a global war. Most of the plot takes place in London, the chief city of Airstrip One. The Oceanic province that had once been called England or Britain. Posters of the party leader, Big Brother, bearing the caption, "Big Brother is watching you," dominate the city, while the ubiquitous telescreen monitors the private and public lives of the populace. The class hierarchy of Oceania has three levels: the upper class inner party, the elite ruling minority, who make up 2% of the population, the middle class outer party, who make up 13% of the population, the lower class proles, who make up 85% of the population and represent the uneducated working class. As the government, the party controls the population with four ministries. The Ministry of Peace deals with war and defense. The Ministry of Plenty deals with economic affairs. The Ministry of Love deals with law and order. The Ministry of Truth deals with news, entertainment, education and art. The protagonist, Winston Smith, a member of the Outer Party, works in the Records Department of the Ministry of Truth as an editor, revising historical records, to make the past conform to the ever-changing party line and deleting references to unpersons, people who have been vaporized, i.e., not only killed by the state but denied existence even in history or memory. The story of Winston Smith begins on the 4th of April 1984. It was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13, yet he is uncertain of the true date, given the regime's continual rewriting and manipulation of history. Smith's memories and his reading of the prescribed book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism by Emanuel Goldstein, revealed that after the Second World War, the United Kingdom fell to civil war and then was absorbed into Oceania, successor state to the United States and British Empire. Simultaneously, the USSR conquered mainland Europe and established the second superstate of Eurasia. The third superstate, Eastasia, comprises the regions of East Asia and Southeast Asia. The three superstates wage perpetual war for the remaining unconquered lands of the world, forming and breaking alliances as is convenient. From his childhood, Winston remembers the atomic wars fought in Europe, Western Russia and North America. It is unclear to him what occurred first: the party's victory in the Civil War, the U.S. annexation of the British Empire, or the war in which Colchester was bombed. Smith's strengthening memories and the story of his family's dissolution suggest that the atomic bombings occurred first, followed by civil war featuring confused street fighting in London itself, and the societal post-war reorganization, which the party retrospectively calls the Revolution plot. Winston Smith lives in Airstrip One, the ruins of an England ravaged by war, civil conflict, and revolution. A member of the middle-class outer party, Winston lives in a one-room London apartment on a diet of black bread, synthetic meals and Victory-branded gin. Telescreens in every building, along with hidden microphones and cameras. permit the thought police to identify anyone who might endanger the party's regime. Children are indoctrinated to inform on suspected thought criminals, especially their parents. Winston works at the Ministry of Truth, or Mini-True, as an editor responsible for historical revisionism. He rewrites records and alters photographs to conform to the state's ever-changing version of the truth, rendering the deleted people and persons. The original documents are incinerated in a memory hole. Winston becomes fascinated by the true past and tries to learn more about it. In an alcove beside his flat's telescreen where he believes he cannot be seen, he begins writing a journal criticizing the party and its enigmatic leader, Big Brother, which, if discovered by the thought police, warrants certain death. At the ministry, Julia, a young woman who maintains the novel-writing machines and whom Winston loathes, surreptitiously hands Winston a note confessing her love. Winston realizes she shares his loathing of the party. Winston and Julia begin a love affair, at first meeting in the country, and eventually in a rented room atop an antiques shop in a proletarian neighborhood of London where they believe they are safe. As the room has no telescreen, Winston approaches the inner party member O'Brien, whom Winston believes is an agent of the Brotherhood, a secret organization that intends to destroy the party. After discussion, O'Brien gives Winston the book The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism by Emmanuel Goldstein, the publicly reviled leader of the Brotherhood. The book explains the concept of perpetual war, the true meanings of the slogans "war is peace," "freedom is slavery," and "ignorance is strength," and how the regime of the party can be overthrown by means of the political awareness of the proles. The thought police capture Winston and Julia in their rented room and deliver them to the Ministry of Love for interrogation. Mr. Charrington, the shopkeeper who rented the room to them, reveals himself as an officer of the thought police. O'Brien is also a thought police agent, part of a sting operation used by the thought police to root out suspected thought criminals. O'Brien tortures Winston with electroshock, showing him how, through controlled manipulation of perception, Winston can cure himself of his insanity, his manifest hatred for the party. O'Brien explains the inner party's motivation, complete and absolute power, mocking Winston's assumption that it was somehow altruistic and for the greater good. Winston confesses to crimes he did and did not commit, implicating anyone and everyone, including Julia, but O'Brien understands that Winston has not betrayed Julia as he had not stopped loving her. O'Brien sends him to room 101 for the final stage of re-education, the most feared room in the Ministry of Love, which contains each prisoner's worst fear. As a wire cage holding hungry rats is fitted onto his face, Winston shouts, "Do it," to Julia, thus betraying her. After being reintegrated into Oceania society, Winston encounters Julia in a park. She reveals that she was also tortured, and each admits betraying the other. Later, Winston, now an alcoholic, sits by himself in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, troubled by memories which he is convinced are false. A news bulletin announces Oceania's decisive victory over Eurasian armies in Africa. A raucous celebration begins outside, and Winston imagines himself a part of it. As he looks up in admiration at her portrait of Big Brother, Winston feels he has at last ended his stubborn, self-willed exile from the love of Big Brother, a love Winston happily returns. Characters. Main characters: Winston Smith, the protagonist who is a phlegmatic everyman. Julia, Winston's lover who is a covert, a rebel from the waist downwards, who publicly espouses party doctrine as a member of the fanatical junior anti-sex league. Big Brother, the dark-eyed, mustachioed embodiment of the party who rules Oceania. O'Brien, a member of the inner party who poses as a member of the Brotherhood, the counter-revolutionary resistance, in order to deceive, trap, and capture Winston and Julia. Emanuel Goldstein, ostensibly a former leader of the party, counter-revolutionary leader of the Brotherhood, and author of the book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. Goldstein is the symbolic enemy of the state, the national nemesis who ideologically unites the people of Oceania with the party, especially during the 2 minutes hate and other fear-mongering. While Winston eventually learns that the book is the product of an inner-party committee that includes O'Brien. Whether Goldstein or his Brotherhood are real or fabrications of party propaganda is something that neither Winston nor the reader is permitted to know. Secondary characters Aronson, Jones, and Rutherford, former members of the inner party whom Winston vaguely remembers as among the original leaders of the revolution. Long before he had heard of Big Brother, they confessed to treasonable conspiracies with foreign powers and were then executed in the political purges of the 1960s. In between their confessions and executions, Winston saw them drinking in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, with broken noses, suggesting that their confessions had been obtained by torture. Later, in the course of his editorial work, Winston sees newspaper evidence contradicting their confessions, but drops it into a memory hole. 11 years later, he is confronted with the same photograph during his interrogation. Ampleforth, Winston's one-time Records Department colleague who was imprisoned for leaving the word God in a Kipling poem as he could not find another rhyme for rot. Winston encounters him at the Mini-Louvre. Ampleforth is a dreamer and intellectual who takes pleasure in his work, and respects poetry and language, traits which cause him disfavor with the party. Charrington, an officer of the Thought Police posing as a sympathetic antiques dealer. Catherine Smith, the emotionally indifferent wife whom Winston can't get rid of despite disliking sexual intercourse. Catherine married Winston because it was their duty to the party, although she was a good thinkful ideologue. They separated because she could not bear children. Divorce is not permitted, but couples who cannot have children may live separately. For much of the story, Winston lives in vague hope that Catherine may die or could be got rid of so that he may marry Julia. He regrets not having killed her by pushing her over the edge of a quarry when he had the chance many years previously. Tom Parsons, Winston's naive neighbor, and an ideal member of the outer party. An uneducated, suggestible man who is utterly loyal to the party, and fully believes in its perfect image. He is socially active and participates in the party activities for his social class. Although friendly towards Smith, and despite his political conformity, he punishes his bully boy son for firing a catapult at Winston. Later, as a prisoner, Winston sees Parsons is in the Ministry of Love because his daughter had reported him to the Thought Police, claiming she overheard him speak against the party whilst he slept. Mrs. Parsons's wife is a hapless woman who is intimidated by her own children, who are members of the Party Youth League and represent the new generation of Oceanian citizens, without memory of life before Big Brother, and without family ties or emotional sentiment, the model society visioned by the inner party. Syme, Winston's colleague at the Ministry of Truth, whom the party vaporized because he remained a lucidly thinking intellectual. He was a lexicographer who helped develop the language and the dictionary of Newspeak, in the course of which he enjoyed destroying words, and wholeheartedly believed that Newspeak would replace Old Speak by the year 2050. Although Sym's politically orthodox opinions aligned with party doctrine, Winston notes that he is too intelligent. He sees too clearly and speaks too plainly, after noting that Sym's name was erased from the members list of the chess club. Winston infers he became an unperson.